Okay, let's have a listen to Dr. David Hawkins in his own words describing the structure of the course in just a minute or two. He's done many, many, many lectures. And so here he's talking about, I'll let him speak for himself and then I'll chime in.
Alright, so we've been dissecting the mind, taking it apart, and one of the reasons we did it in this sequence is because when the obstacles to love are removed, it's sudden. The way to sudden enlightenment is you remove all the obstacles, and then you turn up the fire into the burner, and so everybody will be enlightened within 60 days. We've tried to do it in that way. I noticed that the Course in Miracles did it the same way. I was fascinated by the Course in Miracles because before presenting you with the truth that I am love and I am spirit and God and I are one, etc., long before that, it first disassembles the ego. First it takes the ego out, which is going to say, this is nonsense, this wouldn't apply to me, I'm just a nobody. First it says, you know, my thoughts don't mean anything. Whoa. That was a brilliant move. When I saw that lesson, I said, this is spiritual genius. This is written by spiritual genius. To see that the sequence should be to first disassemble the ego before you present it with spiritual truth. Religion does it the other way. It presents you with spiritual truth at a point where you couldn't possibly grasp that that's a reality. You got so much guilt you couldn't know that for yourself. You got so much shame you couldn't possibly do it. You got so much annoyance with God who's going to punish you later and you're so scared of him you hate him. Religion doesn't have a chance to be this person, you know. You got to talk yourself into believing it, and that's what's called faith. Despite all your rationality of it, you know, you go with it. But for a spiritual seeker, that the correct sequence is to first comprehend the nature of the ego, how it got to be that way, so that you can own it. You can't own the ego if you're going to go into guilt, shame, see it as your enemy, hate it, fear it, etc. And some spiritual pathways do that. They set up the ego as an enemy and reinforce it. So by familiarity, we take the ego apart, you know, stick by stick, like pickup sticks. We see how it does this, creates a bifurcation. Then we go back to the source of the bifurcation, we surrender that, the bifurcation and all the multiple bifurcations that come off of that decision now all disappear. All the algorithms, you know, one choice creates a duality. Each branch of the duality now bifurcates until you've got thousands and thousands of your neurons all jumping to tape in the basket. Getting loud, you want to kill him, he's awful, he's evil, he's terrible, see all that stuff? The guy doesn't know what he's doing, does he? It's a mental piece, right? To be brainwashed into the exact opposite of spiritual truth, there's got to be a few nuts and bolts missing. Alright, so if we disassemble the ego by understanding its structure, so if you want to take something apart, you understand how it's put together. If you understand how it's put together, now you can start taking the sticks out. And the structure becomes weaker and weaker, weaker and weaker. Then you come in with the fire of the heart, after all the obstacles have been removed, that would have already eliminated it or deterred you from even following the pathway of devotion. So the sequence of the lectures, we started with the basic underpinning of the ego, which is the belief in causality. We worked our way through how dualistic thinking arises and how to let go of the positionality, because it only creates a whole other set of dualities, each branch of which creates a whole other set of dualities. And you can pull the pin on the whole bank of it. See? Millions of neurons, and then you pull the pin on this one, they go silent. All that chit-chat stops. So that's the reason we presented this in the sequence that it has. So this is number 8. And I think the way of the heart is number 9. And having seen that the obstacles were all artifacts of mentalization with no intrinsic reality, we can easily dispense with them. And at that point then, spiritual commitment, intensity, what it takes to break the 4-minute mile, now we'll have a chance to succeed without all those impediments in their way. You know? So,
all those mental artifacts. When you recognize the mental artifacts, they're not real. You dispense with them. These are all the impediments. Then it's just like, well, spirituality naturally happens. I mean, you just naturally happy and peaceful. That's what we are.
Is that David Hawkins guy?
Yeah. So with the course, the first half of the workbook starts by undoing the ego. That's what he's talking about. You got to look at the blocks, the barriers. Oh, I'm not good enough. The shame. He deserves punishment. You got to undo that. These are the impediments. And then the second half of the workbook now brings in, I am peace. I want the peace of God. I am connected with all beings everywhere. I love everybody. That doesn't make sense if you say it at the beginning because you're still busy resenting people. Yeah, we have to see the problem with the logic of the ego first. Question that, loosen it up, and then bring in, like he's saying, bring in the light. Because we're more receptive and open to it. So today's lesson is part of that first state of undoing the ego. Well, we have to address things like the world that I see with my five senses, that I value, that I cling to, that I fight for, that I murder, that I steal, that I hoard, all this stuff in this world. We have to question that in order for the light and the peace to have a chance to surface. Okay, so we're going to read about that even more. It's a loaded topic, right? Because there are things that seem valuable, like, what do you mean? Not everything's garbage, right? What is the purpose of anything? That's what it comes down to. What is the purpose of the physical things we're after?